Mary becomes a mother. An announcement. Everyone was surprised one day when Roman soldiers on horseback rode into Nazareth. They announced that Caesar Augustus, the Roman king, had ordered a population count of the whole empire. The king's order was that every man was to return to the hometown of his tribe and be registered without delay. Joseph, being from the tribe of Judah, would have to go to Bethlehem to register and be taxed. "What will we do, Joseph?" asked Mary. "It's winter time, and Bethlehem is a 5-day journey from here." "The journey must be made," he replied sadly. Leaving Nazareth, Mary wanted to be with Joseph, so they decided to leave for Bethlehem as soon as possible. "Let's hope we can return to Nazareth before the baby is born," said Joseph. Mary hurriedly packed their warm wool clothes and other things in travel bags. Joseph tied these bags and some of his carpenter tools on their donkey's back. He left room on the donkey so Mary could ride most of the way. Mary kissed her mother and father goodbye. She told them to watch over the house while they were gone. They left their summer clothes, the rest of Joseph's tools, and all their belongings in their new house. "We'll be back in a few weeks," they told everyone. A crowded town. As Mary and Joseph entered the town of Bethlehem, they realized many other travelers had arrived before them. Every room in the town was filled. Suddenly, Mary realized she would soon be ready to give birth to her baby. Joseph quickly went from house to house in this strange town. He wanted to be a good husband and find a quiet, clean place to welcome Mary's baby into the world. Sadly, he came back to tell her that all he could find for shelter was a stable, a cave dug from the side of a hill and used for keeping animals. Mary told him not to worry. Both of them had wanted to have a special place for the birth of the Messiah. But now it was clear that a stable was all they were going to find. Jesus' arrival. After the baby was born, she hugged and kissed him. She put him into Joseph's arms so he could hold him too. Then they wrapped him in a soft blanket. Mary sang lullabies to him and put him down to sleep in a manger filled with hay. A change of plans. Because Jesus had been born in Bethlehem, Mary and Joseph had to change their plans. They knew it wasn't wise to return to Nazareth until both Mary and the baby were stronger and more able to travel. So they decided to stay in Bethlehem for a while. Joseph was glad he had brought some of his carpenter tools. He could find work in Bethlehem to support his family while they were there. The first surprise. In those first days after Jesus was born, there were many surprises in store for Mary and Joseph. First, shepherds came to visit them. The shepherds told Mary that a choir of angels appeared to them during the night, announcing that the Messiah was born in a stable. "We have come to see this special child," they said to her. "We brought him some gifts." When Mary showed them the baby Jesus, the shepherds were delighted. She thanked them for their gifts. And when they left the stable, They loudly proclaimed the glory of God to all the people they met. More surprises. A short time later, Mary and Joseph made the morning's journey from Bethlehem to the temple in Jerusalem to present Jesus to God. It was the law that a firstborn Jewish boy must be consecrated to God. They were walking through the temple courtyard to the place where they could buy 2 turtle doves as an offering. An old man named Simeon walked up to Mary, blessed the baby, and asked to hold him. When Simeon handed Jesus back to Mary, he told her that Jesus was destined to bring about the rise and fall of many Jewish people. He will be rejected by numbers of his people, said Simeon sadly. Looking directly at Mary, he said, and a sword of sorrow will pierce your own heart. Before Mary and Joseph took a few more steps, an aged holy woman of the temple walked up to them, looked at Jesus, and began praising God. Then the woman turned to the people passing by and began to speak prophecies about Mary's child. Although Mary wondered how this holy man and holy woman knew about Jesus, she treasured every word they said about him. Still another surprise. When they returned to Bethlehem, another surprise happened. 3 wise and wealthy men from Persia appeared at the doorway of the place where Mary and Joseph were living. They had traveled hundreds of miles, riding on camels, to see the new king, as they called Jesus. They treated him like a king too. From their luggage on the camels' backs, they brought out gifts of gold, frankincense, and myrrh. They placed them at the feet of Jesus, just as they would do for a king. When Mary and Joseph asked the wise men how they found their way to Bethlehem, they said they followed a star that appeared in the sky. 2 warning dreams. Then, even more surprising things happened. The night the wise men were planning to leave Bethlehem, they were warned in a dream not to go home by way of Jerusalem, but to take another highway. They obeyed the dream. Soon after they left, Joseph had a warning dream too. An angel in the dream told him to take Mary and the child and flee to Egypt. The reason was that Herod, the Roman ruler in Jerusalem, was trying to kill the child who was supposed to be the new king and savior of the Jewish people. Mary and Joseph were now accustomed to having God's messages come to them in dreams and visions. Saving the baby. In the middle of the night, Mary and Joseph quickly tied on their donkey's back what belongings they could, leaving everything else behind. Their first concern was to save Jesus' life. Long before the sun rose, they were on the road to Egypt. Mary held the baby close to her body to keep him from getting chilled in the cold, damp air. Sad news. News travels fast. Mary and Joseph were on their journey only a few days when word came that King Herod had ordered his soldiers to kill all male children in Bethlehem under 2 years old. Mary then realized that if they had delayed in Bethlehem only a few days, Jesus would have been killed. Mary shivered as she sensed the danger to Jesus. As she wept for all the mothers whose children had been murdered by Herod, she could feel the sword of sorrow piercing her heart. For the first of many times, she would recall the words of Simeon in the temple. A message to Nazareth. As the Holy Family began the long journey to Egypt, over 300 miles away, Mary thought of her parents. Mary and Joseph asked some travelers to tell their families in Nazareth that they were on their way to Egypt and did not know when they would return. The travelers promised to deliver the message. Mary hoped they would keep their promise, for she worried about her mother and father. She wanted them to know she was safe, together with Joseph and baby Jesus. Many questions. As they traveled farther and farther away from their country, Mary had many things to think about. How strange are the ways of God, she thought. Only a few weeks ago, she and Joseph set out from Nazareth, expecting to return there soon. Now, on the unfamiliar road to Egypt, she wondered if she would ever return to Nazareth. Would she ever talk with her mother and father again and see her friends? And why had God let his own son be born in a stable? Why did God first announce Jesus' birth to poor shepherds? Why did God give the sign of the star to Gentiles, the wise men? Wasn't Jesus supposed to be a savior for the people of Israel? And Egypt? Why Egypt? How would she and Joseph manage to live in Egypt? Would they find people there who spoke their language? Would Joseph be able to find carpenter work? Would they find a house to live in? Mary's mind was filled with many questions. Called back from Egypt. As far as we can tell, Mary and Joseph lived with Jesus in Egypt for at least a few years. Then God's messenger came to Joseph in a dream. The angel said now they could return to the land of Israel safely because the king who wanted to murder Jesus was dead. Returning home. As they journeyed back to the land of Israel, Joseph and Mary thought they would like to live near Jerusalem, perhaps even in Bethlehem. But Joseph was told in another dream to settle farther north. So they decided to go back to the town of Nazareth, where they had been married. Sadness and rejoicing. When the Holy Family walked into Nazareth and went to see their families, there was both sadness and rejoicing. The sad news was that Mary's father, Joachim, died while they were in Egypt. People said he died of sadness and worry over Mary, his only daughter, who left Nazareth and never returned. The message that travelers brought him about her going to Egypt worried him all the more. How much he loved her is what people said. Mary loved her father very much too, and she cried when she heard of his death. Meeting Grandmother Anne. There was much joy in Nazareth too, for Mary's mother Anne was there to greet the weary travelers. Mary used to tell Jesus about his grandmother Anne. Now, at last, he was receiving her first hugs and kisses. Mary used to tell Jesus stories of the Jewish people. Now, Grandmother Anne would also tell him stories about his grandparents and their families.